Hello and welcome to Picture Me Coding. My name is Erik Aker. Today, surprisingly, I have a co-host who is named Mike Mall. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
It's not really a surprise. We hang out every week doing this.
Which is kind of surprising in and of itself, I guess.
Okay. I guess it is a surprise that we're still doing this. We have 3 listeners. 3 people listened.
Wow.
Yeah, on the rocket to success right there. Mike, this week I have been listening a lot to this band called Good Looks. Spotify introduced me to them a while ago, and I kind of listened to it. And then something happened, and I don't know. They had this album called Bummer Year and a song called Bummer Year, and I just felt like head over heels in love with this song. It feels like a complete song. And there's something about the band, you know, like 20-year-old keening sound. The world's kind of sucky, real echoey. And I kind of initially heard them and thought, this is background music, but I won't love it. But I just cannot stop listening to this song, Bummer Year. There's a quote about the band that they are sadness experts bringing you positive vibes when possible. I really like that. Positive vibes when possible. Maybe that's a rare thing. I made you listen to this band. What did you think?
I like them too. I like the album, particularly the title track. It kind of creeps up on you because it sounds at first like a relatively conventional rock song, and then you start to pay a little more attention to it. And one, it's got some interesting guitar work that's actually pretty, nice playing. But also the lyrics on this song are both sort of funny and subversive.
Yeah, I like that too. I had the same response where I was like, I kind of like this song. Whoa, what's he saying? Whoa, I think I love this song. I love it. I can't stop listening to it. The lyrics, the song starts, all my friends from high school, they all bought motorcycles, joined up with a bike gang, supported Donald Trump. I don't think they're evil, even when they're awful. It just goes on and on. The band's from South Texas. So I guess you can kind of imagine the milieu these guys grew up in, and then they all moved to Austin. And he has this line, they're the kind of people you want with you in a bar fight, even when you caused it, because you talk too much shit.
Yeah, that's a great line.
That's funny.
It's very funny. And then later on in the song, there's a line in there about, I forget exactly how it goes, but it's something like, they'll only listen to you when they're fucking scared of you or something like that. So it gets pretty serious there at the end.
It does. Yeah. He's talking about class consciousness. Like, whoa, that's heady for South Texas, I imagine. He has this thing about that. The end of that first stanza. They're the kind of people you want with you when you got a flat tire. Here they come racing in some stupid jacked up truck. It's like, I don't know. It just makes me laugh. Yeah. It's like being embarrassed about people you were friends with back in high school and the decisions they made, and they're not terrible. Like, you still keep those friendships, and you're an idiot too. Like, I really like it, but I love the music.
I relate to that aspect of the song a lot, having grown up in rural Indiana, which is kind of like Texas with snow. But yeah, it's a nice song. Actually, the whole album is very listenable, and I think the lyrics are definitely a cut above what you get on a normal rock album.
I think you're right. It's the song I put it on. I just couldn't stop listening to it, and that's the first time that's happened to me in a little while. Where there's a song where I'm like, I need to hear this every hour, please. I need 50 cc's of that song this hour. I haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah, I've listened to it over and over. Put it on my 2023 favorites list. So,
What do you got?
So, as you know, I'm kind of a power pop fan.
I did not know that.
Well, you and I've Big Star, Guided by Voices.
Hold on, that's power pop? I'm confused.
It is. Yeah.
I thought power pop. Jeez, what did I think power pop was?
I don't know, but Big Star is sort of the archetypical American power pop band. And there's certain bands that I really like from the late 70s, early 80s that, it's kind of when I was 16, 17 years old, and it was kind of the time in my life when I was exploring music. So, Elvis Costello, Joe Jackson, the Squeeze, bands like that were kind of a little bit outside of the Bob Seger, Led Zeppelin diet that was typical for where I grew up.
Nerd music, yeah. People
Nerd
I knew
music.
who listened to that stuff when they were younger were total nerds. They were into Devo, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Devo. Especially, they were kind of local boys because they were from Ohio. Anyway.
Wait, so did you tell me yet what the power pop thing is now?
I'm getting there, though.
I'm interrupting.
So anyway, I listened to a lot of this music, and then Spotify tends to throw me into like some power pop stream, and they played this band that played a song by this band that I'd never heard before, I don't think. And anyway, the band is called Any Trouble, and the album came out in 1980, and it's called Where Are All the Nice Girls?
Oh, wow. So this is a thing you hadn't heard. Came out in 1980. It's not like a pastiche thing, kind of like the Tubs. Maybe that's unfair to them, but not pastiche. We're talking like you mined it out of the record bin of Spotify.
Yeah, this actually came out at that time, and I don't know, it probably got some radio play, but definitely not a band that's well known now. Although, as I was saying, they are famous enough to at least have a Wikipedia page. So, they weren't totally unheard of. But anyway, this album is just like one catchy song after another. It's got a pretty Elvis Costello vibe to it. Maybe not quite the same lyrical quirkiness that he's known for, but just very fun to listen to, and something that to me seems like it should have more appreciation.
Yeah, I have this thing with Elvis Costello. I hear an Elvis Costello song and I think, I should listen to more Elvis Costello. And then I try to listen to a record and I'm like, there's some songs he's written I just love. Like, that they're just worth keeping in the dresser drawer forever for the rest of your life. So that you look in the drawer, they're still there. Okay, cool. I can listen to that when I want to. But others on the album, maybe you had to be there.
Yeah, that could be some of it. That run of albums that he had from, the late 70s with My Aim Is True through, 10 years later. Pretty strong run of albums, and stuff that I still listen to fairly frequently.
Do you know where Any Trouble this band is from?
I think they are also from England. I think Manchester, maybe.
Well, that's cool. A new find. You dug a gem out of the Spotify bin. Yeah,
I always like that when a lot of times you'll hear stuff on these random streams on Spotify where you're like, I like that song, and then you go listen to the album and you're like, oh, now I understand why that band never made it. But this is an exception. I think this whole album is pretty strong.
Wow. Listener, there are gems out there in the past. Our job is to go out and find them with our metal detectors. I do have this fear, Mike, that there's got to be so much stuff I never heard over the last 40 that came out over the last 40 years. It's got to be amazing. Where is that stuff? How do I get it? It's like I'm mining for gold.
Yeah, I fear that a lot of it's lost too. You figure that some of the stuff that we're listening to now is probably not going to be the stuff that's played on classic radio in 20 years. And
classic rock, classic rock, Run the Jewels, 20 years.
Yeah, they will probably endure, but I think there's other stuff. So if you extrapolate back 40 years, there obviously was stuff that not a lot of people were listening to, and probably had relatively small album runs, and or has either been tossed out or is sitting in the back of some shop on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley or something like that. So probably nobody has. It may not be even be on streaming services. So yeah, it's interesting to find things you haven't heard that are 40 or 50 years old.
I have a game I want to play with you this week. As we've been talking about software. We talk about music and then software because this is a music podcast about software. So music first, software. Today I have a game for you instead of just a discussion topic. I call the game Quotes Tennis. And the way it works is you give me a quote, and my job is to disagree with it and come up with a reason I disagree with it, even though I may not at all. And I don't even know these quotes in advance. So here's why I like this game. It doesn't require any research on my part. We could just show up. You could just lob a softball quote at me. My job is to crank it out of the park. And then we can actually, I guess we could see if we really do disagree with it after that. And then I'll do the same for you. Do you want to play?
Let's do it.
All right. So the only rule is they have to be a reasonably famous quote about our field. So software, engineering, any of that stuff. All right, you go first. Hit me with it.
Okay, my first one is from Harold Abelson. I think this is actually from the book Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs. And the line is, programs must be written for people to read and only incidentally for machines to execute.
Okay. My job is to say, wrong, Harold Abelson. You were wrong. I have like a whole dozen years of experience to base this opinion on. Okay, but why is he wrong? That's the hard part. And if I don't convincingly tell you he's wrong, then I don't get a point for this here. So I guess the argument would be we mostly run the programs and we don't read them. Write once software, right? Like Perl, I just write it and then nobody reads it. It's mostly run by programs. So I don't think it really needs to be read. I can't do this, Mike. I can't do it. You win. You win this round.
Okay, I'll consider that to be an ace.
Yeah, so I lost that round. I don't agree. I cannot disagree with that. What do you think about this? You brought it to me. I already lost. I can't believe I introduced a game I'm going to lose miserably at.
So I think 10 years ago, I would have agreed with this very strongly and would have had a hard time formulating arguments against it.
Oh, so maybe it's like in another 20 years, I'll be in your shoes once I have your experience.
Yeah, so two things come to mind for me. One is I read this article recently about how the team, I think it's at OpenMind, had applied some of their reinforcement learning technology to creating algorithms. And they actually came up with a better sort algorithm than what was in the C standard library. Mm-hmm. And they actually included it in the C standard library. It was, good enough to replace what was already there. And it's unlikely, I think, that the program that generated this algorithm was trying to make it readable to human beings. Mm-hmm. So I think, one argument to be made is if the computers are writing the code and the computers can do it better than we can, does it really matter if humans can read it?
Oh man, I didn't see this AI thing coming at all. I was completely blindsided by that. If no AI, it's easier to agree with then, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have some experience from my past where, there was a point in my life where I worked with people who had PhDs in other fields. And so they were brilliant people, but not necessarily people who were great coders.
Yeah, I love trying to produce the most prosaic code. It always reminds me of that Hemingway line, which I'm going to fumble because I didn't look it up, about how it's really hard to make a simple sentence, something like that.
Yeah, I think, I think you and I think that this mindset of you want to make code that is elegant and readable and understandable to the people who come later is not something that's universally shared. I think there are, even if you take AI out of the picture, I think there are human beings who are more or less of the opinion that if it runs efficiently and solves the problem, it doesn't really matter if it's 6,000 lines of undocumented C code or not.
Oh, but journeyman day-to-day developers hate maintaining that stuff. If you're going to pay people to fix bugs, you're just making them miserable. Purgatory, or like an old Far Side cartoon of hell. That's what that is. I think about Grace Hopper and Christian COBOL in this quote. She was one who talked about how when she wrote COBOL, she was arguing against octal and symbol manipulation, right? And code as a form of math. She wanted programming to be using plain English statements. And that, I mean, everything we do really follows from her work. It's pioneering. And then I also think about Donald Knuth and literate programming. And the thing about literate programming, and when I first heard about it, I thought, yeah, I studied literature. That sounds right. Let's do that. And then people don't do that, so maybe the truth is somewhere in between. But I think Jupyter Notebooks, great example of literate programming, but those are mostly used by data scientists to give reasoning for what they're doing and like give background for their data science. I think for most of what we do, you don't need literate programming. And I think New's argument was interesting. If you ask people to do literate programming, they're going to have to like write virtually an essay about what they're doing. And so then they're going to have to actually think about what they're doing. And so the code will be better. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah. It may just be that it's an idea whose time has not yet come. Not sure that it's something that's relegated to the dustbin yet.
Well, I think Jupyter Notebooks really, but I guess I think the audience matters there. Who's the audience? And if the audience really is humans, maintainers, then yeah, it has to be readable. My favorite code is code that is I can read as fast as possible. That's what I optimize for. Can I read this stuff as quickly as possible and understand what it does? It has to be ultra dumb. And I think when people work with me, they realize pretty soon that when I say dumb, it's this huge compliment for code and engineering solutions. All right. I got one for you. I wanted to use a Grace Hopper one because I think there's a lot of interesting inspiration from what she did and said. So there are these things that have floated around in my head since I heard them, and then later on I realized, oh, that's something Grace Hopper said. She said it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to get permission. That's just an example of a thing that I've heard for years and never knew was a Grace Hopper line. But here's the one for you. Humans are allergic to change. They love to say we've always done it this way. I try to fight that. That's why I have a clock on my wall that runs counterclockwise.
Interesting. I'm a little unsure how to disagree with this one.
It's too hard to disagree with. I thought it was a softball.
No,
humans love change is how you start.
It's not. It's not that it's such a softball as it is. I'm not sure if the counter argument is she's wrong, humans love change, or if the counter argument is where was I going with this?
They don't hate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think she is dead on in the sense that processes and methods are very hard to get people to change once they are in place. I've seen a couple of paradigm changes in terms of programming languages during my life, and both of them have been pretty slow. I think it's hard to convince people that things are better unless they immediately see the benefits of them.
I'm not giving you a point for this.
I was kind of the same way with, when we were working together 5 or 6 years ago, I was initially kind of resistant to Docker because it seemed to me like I wasn't gaining much by using it, but it was pretty complicated. Mm-hmm. And then I encountered things like ECS and Kubernetes, and I was like, oh, yeah, I see how this helps me. Let's definitely use it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think she's right in that sense, but I think it's not so much that human beings are allergic to change as it is that they're resistant to things where the benefit is not clear.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's a tough one to argue with. But on the other hand, I do think of like the explosion of JavaScript frameworks. That's not an allergic to change. That's not a symptom of being allergic to change. That's a symptom of something else. Or the explosion of programming languages, everybody making their own language. I think the reason this quote resonates with me is that I've been in workplaces where I'll say, we want to solve this particular problem. And someone will say, let's do it like this because that's what everyone else does. And sometimes that's fine. But in other cases, it's an escape hatch for really thinking about what we're doing. It reminds me of Robert Frost and Mending Wall, and my neighbor never, he says good fences make good neighbors, and he never thinks around this. Like, well, I don't remember what Robert Frost has on his side, but whatever it is not going to eat the other guy's apple trees. So I think Grace Hopper arguing for don't be afraid to change things is a good inspirational quote. I don't think it's a primary symptom of our industry, though. We change stuff all the time and people complain. But I mean, you're right. There are certain paradigms we just sort of get satisfied with and we stick with. All right. You got one for me? Oh, sorry. You want one more follow up on that one?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's not sort of an innate thing with human beings. I think there probably are people who dislike change and people who love change, but I think for me at least, change is usually a result of somebody seeing some sort of benefit, in terms of time to market or cost or, the just things being more industry standard.
I don't know if I buy that. There's a study about how people love IKEA furniture because they put it together and they have pride of ownership that they built the thing. I think that happens in our field. People go, I don't quite like this thing. I need to do something different. I'll build my own thing, and they love their own thing. I've been guilty of that.
Yeah, there's definitely the so-called NIH syndrome, but yeah, I guess what I'm agreeing to disagreeing is that this is an innate property of human beings that all of us are resistant to change.
Oh, okay, maybe that's an easy thing to disagree with. All right, your turn. So far, our score is 0-0. We're terrible at this game.
Yeah, I think I at least got my racket on the ball, but I probably returned it out of bounds or something. So.
I think you blasted it straight into the net, and I just stood on the other side, like, waiting for a return.
Alrighty, I'm gonna go with this quote from Tom Cargill. It's one of my favorite all-time programming aphorisms, I think, because it's funny and true, and also kind of hard to explain. Anyway, the quote is, the first 90% of the code accounts for the first 90% of the development time. The remaining 10% of the code accounts for the other 90% of the development time. I've always enjoyed that.
That's hyperbole. Can I disagree with hyperbole?
Yeah, you can definitely disagree with the math of it, the logic of it, but I think the sentiment is harder to counter.
Okay, fine. You're serving up a really hard one for me. Is that the Pareto principle? Pareto principle is 80-20 rule, right? Maybe I'm confused too. Yeah,
that's the Pareto principle. Is that?
Okay, here's how I'm going to disagree with Tom Cargill from Bell Labs. Who's ever even heard of Bell Labs? What is that? They make bells?
Yeah, I assume it's some sort of research institute for bells.
I think. So what Tom Cargill is saying is projects are never done. That's my misreading of what he says. And my disagreement is, no way. I finish stuff all the time, my friend. I finished a dozen things last month. Okay, just look at my record. This is not a very good disagreement. Why is this game so hard? Okay, so what he's saying is you get all the easy stuff out of the way and then you spend a long time on the hard stuff, I think. Maybe what we try to do is make someone else do the hard stuff. Geez, this is like okay. I don't have any response to this quote. Well, you tell me how to interpret this thing. I'm not getting anything for this one. I lost.
I think my take on it has always been that you start out with everything that you anticipated and planned, and that goes more or less as you expected. And then you run into this part at the end where everything that you didn't anticipate comes up. Sometimes that's bad planning. You forgot to factor in testing or you forgot to factor in performance issues. And so you have to do those things at the end. But I think more commonly, it's just, things that you could not have foreseen come up at the end. And it's harder to get that project to the done state than you anticipated. So, and it seems to have been, at least in my experience, sort of true in the abstract. Obviously, you don't get 90% plus 90%.
Yeah.
But it seems to be true that most projects take longer than you initially anticipate.
Yeah. What you're talking about is a really beautiful description of this thing that continues to puzzle me. I get these requests and they seem so well scoped and so obvious to me. And I will do 90% of them in a very short amount of time. And then suddenly discover as I'm doing them, oh, I forgot about this edge case. I forgot about this scenario that might happen. It seems almost impossible for me to pre-envision all of the scenarios I have to account for. I kind of want a name for this phenomenon. Maybe I'll call it the Cargillization. It's a very easy word to say. Cargillization of my projects. All right, score 0-0 after three attempts. Okay, here we go. Here's one that's been in my head. I don't think it's going to surprise you. Playing quotes tennis. We've never used this one. This one's been in my head since I first heard it. Larry Wall, creator Perl, former PhD student in linguistics. The 3 chief virtues of a programmer are laziness, impatience, and hubris. Now, actually, this was in the Camel book, the famous Programming Perl book. I did read it there, but I have heard people say it over and over again. And it has been in my head forever. So you got to disagree with this. 3 chief virtues of a programmer are laziness, impatience, and hubris.
Do I get any points for partially disagreeing with it?
Oh, man. Maybe. Yeah, let's see how you do.
Maybe it's a drop shot.
Okay, yeah, let's see how you do.
So I agree with laziness. This has always been sort of a guiding principle for me. And I think the way I've read this in other places is that, programmers who are too industrious want to start writing code. And so they start writing code before they think about things. And my personal belief is that very often if you spend a couple of days just staring at the wall and doodling in your notebook, you don't get any lines of code for those days, but you probably think of better solutions than you would have had you merely started to type. So I agree with that part. The impatience part, I feel I don't agree with, and I feel it's sort of contradictory.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even really sure what he means by that.
Maybe they want everything to go faster because they don't want to sit around waiting for it.
Yeah, I suppose. It seems a little bit in conflict with the laziness criteria, but I feel like impatience is a sort of thing that would cause you to want to start writing code before you really contemplated what you're doing. And
yeah.
So
not a virtue that we should aspire to.
Yeah, possibly, you need this combination of laziness and patience, or you just never start working. I don't know.
What about hubris? To me, that's the most fiery, problematic, we should say.
So I have this, and my interpretation of what he means there is sort of the same thing that I have heard about actual writers, which is that if you don't think that what you're writing is good, you will probably not ever put pen to paper. And so there has to be, a certain amount of hubris to think what I am writing is so interesting that other people will want to read it and will be interested in it. And I think maybe that's what he means here with code as well. And there are people, I think, who are not confident enough in what they're doing that they get sort of stymied, and especially with especially with greenfield projects where you have to start from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
There are probably people who are good at fixing bugs and adding features, but if you give them a project where there are very few restrictions, very few constraints on what they're supposed to do, they just get paralyzed.
Yeah, but maybe not necessarily negative connotation in that. Like that's totally, it's just a different skill set maybe.
Yeah, so I don't know. Hubris seems a little extreme to me, but I think maybe you do have to have, you're sort of becoming a creator, and you have to have a little bit of at least self-confidence to say, I'm going to create this thing.
Oh, okay. So like an absence of self-doubt of your creative vision. I always hated this quote. Always. I always saw it as, we're going to try to represent the typical trope of our, like tech software person of the 90s and early 2000s, like nerdy, super self-confident, impatient, lazy. I never liked it. To me, the best developers I ever worked with were just extremely self-motivated, and I would never call that laziness. I mean, these are people who are like, oh, our error handling in our app over in this 20% of it is inconsistent with the other 80%, and that really bothers me. It's like seeing a comma that shouldn't be there, and you can't ship the stupid document to print unless you delete that comma. Those people are not lazy. They have some incredible motivation to make things consistent and beautiful. Impatience, I don't know. I think he's just talking about like you just want stuff to go quickly. You don't want to sit there waiting for it. There are things I've worked on with very slow feedback loops, like build pipelines. You change your pipeline, you create a build, and it almost always takes minutes, and you're sitting there just tapping your fingers like, yeah, I could be working on something else. So really nice feedback loop is nice. Maybe that's impatience. And hubris, to me, that bums me out, though. I love Larry Wall quotes in general. Like, he says a lot of funny and ridiculous stuff, and he definitely has a take that, to me, sounds very 90s about programming. And there's something about his way of seeing, like, philosophizing about code that I like. But the hubris always bothered me, because similar to the, like, super self-motivated types, the people I love working around the most are those who are critically aware and modest, so they are constantly wondering, what is it I don't know, what have I not thought about? They sort of have an intellectual humility. I really love that. I love when people say, I don't know, and then we try to figure it out. That's so fun. I kind of hate this Larry Wall quote. I wish you would have given me this one. I would have just tried to smash it with my hammers.
Well, let's say that I lobbed your serve and you smashed it. So
I got a point finally.
You get that point.
I get that point. All right, your turn to serve.
So this one is one that I had not heard before. I saw it in the More Programming Pearls book, and the sort of famous bumper sticker software article. It's attributed to Mary Shaw, the the software architecture pioneer from Carnegie Mellon, but it's also apparently derives from something called Sturgeon's Law. Anyway, the quote is 90% of software is crap because 90% of everything is crap.
Oh, geez. Can I pass?
I think the 90% of everything is crap is the Sturgeon's Law part, but...
What does that mean? 90% of everything is crap. Most stuff sucks. I will say that when I first started writing software, I immediately was like, wow, why does anything work? How can I go to the bank ATM and put my card in and request money and it spits money back out? How does that even work? Most software is broken. I don't really feel like I want to accept 90% of everything as crap. This might be my optimism. Sergio Leone said that John Ford, the filmmaker, made these westerns with John Wayne. He was an optimist. Sergio Leone said, I am a pessimist. I'm more like Grand Vistas, Monument Valley. That's me when I look at software. There's beautiful stuff out there. 90%. I can't do this one, Mike.
Your standards are just too low.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I start out expecting things to be terrible. And when they're not, I go, wow, that's pretty cool. I'm impressed. No, I don't know if that's true either. You go on this one. I can't even do it.
The 90% might be a little bit hard to argue in favor of. It's, kind of a arbitrary level, I think, but I do like the sentiment here, which is that sure, software is bad, but don't forget that everything is bad. So software really shouldn't be different.
Oh.
And, that's kind of what I take from this. If I look at most software, there's fairly rare cases where I see something in software that is like the Monument Valley of software.
Mm-hmm.
Most software is, like the vacant lot.
I would be a little more charitable. Most of it's getting the job done.
Yeah.
It's like an Oldsmobile that still runs.
Yeah, it's getting the job done, I would say, most of the time. I would guess that a majority of software has probably got flaws if you find the right edge cases. But
if we were in a philosophy class, we'd really have to define our terms, though. What is crap?
Yeah, that is tricky.
I think maybe we have different definitions of crap.
Yeah, I guess if you think of crap as being stuff that is completely useless and wasteful, then
doesn't work at all.
Then 90% of software probably is not crap.
Yeah, this stuff works. Maybe crap in this case is an aesthetic term.
Yeah, I mean there may be if you had good coverage, there may be some bits of software in a typical system that never get executed and should probably be thrown away.
Mm.
But I still like this sort of idea that, I think there's a pervasive idea that software is worse than other types of engineering endeavor, going back a little bit.
Oh, yeah,
to
we
what
talked about that last week. Bridge building is so much better than what we do.
Yeah. And I think that, again, the numbers are hard to quantify, but I think the idea that software is broken in sort of an exceptional way is maybe a little bit of hyperbole, because, I think what this quote is trying to convey is that, everything, very few things are built up to the standards of perfection. And so we should probably give software a break there.
Okay. That actually seems like a pretty tame thing to cop to. But, I mean, I have a vacuum that's going to last more than 10 years, and most of my code won't. All right, moving on. I didn't get anything for that one. I actually looked this one up. I was like, this is a thing I say all the time when I'm talking to engineers on our teams, and I'm trying to help them think about how systems interact with each other. As systems send and receive messages, there's often this, like, how do we conform? How do we make it easy to know the shape of those messages? How do we change them over time? And there's this quote I've always liked, and I had to look up where it came from, but it's be conservative in what you send, be liberal in what you accept. Turns out that's not even the real quote. The real quote was be conservative in what you do, be liberal in what you accept from others. And I guess the name for this is the robustness principle, and it originally comes from John Postel, who used this phrase when he was giving a spec for TCP. But I do prefer be conservative in what you send, be liberal in what you accept. It's usually one of these phrases I drop on engineers who maybe don't have as much experience, and they go, wow. It's a quote that you can wow people with. What do you think? Can you disagree with this one?
I think I understand what he was going for, but I think it's a little bit of I would not choose this as a guiding principle, I don't think. I think sort of a classical case. It's not software, but, there's this famous flaw in the original Hubble Space Telescope, where, there are different manufacturers making pieces of that, and they, there were not sufficient precision in the places where they were supposed to fit together, and so, the thing didn't work when they put it into space, and they had to go back and fix it. And so, what I interpret this to mean is try to be careful in what you're doing, but also expect that things are going to break, or that you're going to get input that's not conformant, or, services may be unavailable, so you need to retry them, that kind of thing. Principles that we use in building software, but it also seems like taking this too liberally, this means that you are not requiring your partners in these projects to be as precise as you are.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I think that is how I usually interpret it. If I'm building a system that other systems are going to talk to, when I give those systems messages, maybe they're sending me a message and I'm responding, I'm going to be extremely strict in the content of what I send back to them. So they're highly unlikely to be surprised by what they get from me. But I'm going to be pretty forgiving in what they do. I think there's a parenting metaphor in here, which I probably don't want to explore.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to give you 0.8 points on that one, and that means that I win. I got a full point, you got 0.8. I'm just eking out, but there's extra credit, bonus questions here at the bottom. Anybody can take these. So I got one bonus one. Because of the Larry Wall one, where I've just always been sort of wrestling with this Larry Wall quote ever since I heard it, I got a Larry Wall one that I always kind of liked. And I do think about this one all the time too. And I think about it not just with what he talks about as programming languages, I think about it with all software engineering solutions. So he says, computer languages differ not so much in what they make possible, but in what they make easy. And similarly, he was interviewed once, and he said, easy things should be easy, and hard things should be possible. And I love this quote because sometimes, I'm not disagreeing with it. Dang it. Well, I'll just finish that time. I love this quote because I get pitched on software solutions that are, you pay for it and then it does a job for you. And I always wonder, is it going to make hard things impossible? Is it going to make certain easy things harder than they should be? I always think about this. What does it make easy? What does it make hard? What does it make easy, and what does it do for the hard things? All right, what do you think? I'm already whiffing on this one.
This one seems a little bit self-serving to me.
Because it's about Perl, like the creator of Perl.
Yeah, because it's coming from Perl.
You could see a lot of Larry Wall quotes as self-serving.
I don't think I agree with the sentiment.
This is a late edition. You might end up winning.
I think it tends to be true in the sense that every programming language does seem to have some sort of specialty or bias that it starts out with, and that by virtue of that, some things are easy in that language and other things are harder.
Mm-hmm.
Perl's kind of a extreme case there, maybe, but even take Rust, which we both really like. It's fairly general purpose, but I don't know if it's the language that I want to do linear algebra in. You can, and people wrote libraries for that, but it seems to me like there's probably better ways to go.
Yeah, they have that matmul operator in Python, right? Makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, or just use Fortran, like us old guys.
I never use Fortran.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't use Fortran either these days. But so I guess what he's saying is literally true, because computer languages do seem to make certain things easier and certain things harder. But I don't think that's something that people start out with as a design principle. I think it's sort of a side effect of the way people build programming languages.
I thought you were at first starting to reject that because you were just going to shoot the messenger, and I was like, yeah, you get a point for that. But you didn't end up shooting the messenger. You ended up saying this is not how they're designed. It is funny that you called out Larry Wall as a creator of Perl, because then you got to ask, well, what does Perl make easy? It makes it easy to write super obfuscated scripts that other people struggle to read. That's a goal?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was a pretty big Perl fan at one time, but it was specifically because I was using it for the purpose for which it was intended. Mm. And, but also, to be fair, I did also write like web servers in Perl at one point in time.
Mm. Larry Wald, I think he won the obfuscated C contest once.
Did he write a C program that generated Perl?
I actually don't know what he actually wrote. Okay, I got another bonus. So I'm going to give you a point for that one. You were in the lead. You're winning. I can deal with that. Next bonus. This one I think is pretty hard. It's this Fred Brooks. I never actually read the Mythical Man Month book. I know you read it. I wanted to pull this one out for you because I know you told me about that book so many times. So I just thought I will get Mike with this one. Adding manpower to a late software project makes it later.
Yeah, that's kind of like an ace that hits the line.
Zing!
It's
cannot return that one.
Very difficult to disagree with. I think there might be some very exceptional cases where it does work to add people, but it's adding people who are sort of incidental to the functionality, like maybe adding some extra testers or documentation people might get things shipped quicker. But
all right, well, you already won, so tell me why you agree with this one.
Well, I think it was demonstrated on his projects, and I think it's been demonstrated time and time again throughout the years. A lot of people misinterpret this a little bit, so that I think a lot of people interpret this to mean teams should always be small. And
two pizza
teams, yeah. And if you get bigger teams, it's going to make the project
slow you down. Well, isn't that related to the communication lines? Like the more people you have, that's how it was explained to me.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I think really what this is about is staffing things correctly. Getting the right number of people to do the work that you need to do. And of course, this is an extremely hard thing to do, which is why most people have opted with sticking with small teams and trying to build fairly focused things.
You could almost do the 90% and then the second 90% kick it off to this other group of people.
Right. I think the sort of disastrous thing that Brooks is talking about here is sort of the idea that if you've built 90% of the system with two people, then adding another person is going to make you go faster over that last 90%. Mm-hmm. And I think all of us know that's wrong from experience. Mm-hmm. And it was clearly wrong for his, for the projects that he's describing in Mythical Man Month. That doesn't necessarily mean that a project shouldn't have had three people from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So, having a 3-person team as opposed to a 2-person team is not necessarily a bad thing, which I think is how some people interpret this. It's the adding that extra manpower in the late stages of the project in particular, which makes this so true.
Yeah, trivially, because, even just bringing people up to speed on what they would need to do, can you imagine?
Yeah.
All right, Mike, you win. I want to make a better effort next time. I want to try to a little better showing. I got to look for a little more balls that are in the zone that I can really take a whack at.
Can I throw another Fred Brooks quote back at you?
Yeah.
To see if maybe
see if I can
tie it up or something.
Get a little bit of points. Sure.
So I'm a big Fred Brooks fan. He's one of the few Turing Award winners I've actually met, and one of his sort of famous lines is something that I have always agreed with very strongly until maybe the last couple of years. I'm maybe wavering a little bit, but anyway, one of his famous quotes is "Build one, throw away, because you will anyway." And it's sort of the prototyping principle, and it's another thing that sort of came out of his experiences that are described in the Mythical Man Month. It's something that I have adhered to throughout my career, and I just wonder if it's something that is as appealing to you as it is to me.
No, don't agree. I don't build one to throw away. I build one to adapt and develop and evolve. I assume that anything I build is going to evolve. I really would use that word, evolution. It's going to change. It's going to have requests for features that I did not anticipate. I can't anticipate the future, so I need to pin down a certain set of behaviors that make sense and are as basic as possible for what I'm being asked to do. But I assume that the thing will adapt over time. I'm not going to throw it away. I'm going to build. If I need to spend a day making sure my error messaging is consistent and beautiful, I'm going to do that. That wasn't me in the other example, by the way. Definitely wasn't me. But if I need to do that, I will do that. And if somebody in the business is like, hey, we just need to see this prototype if it works, I'm going to be like, yes, it's a little more complicated than I thought. And secretly, I'm making beautiful error messaging that's consistent so that I don't ever have to touch it again. I don't buy it.
Okay. I will give you that point.
But the first half, like, build the first to throw away, there's some kernel of truth I could see in there. Don't overbuild. Don't over-engineer. Build the basic thing. Imagine that you might throw it away. I do kind of have that. I have that with systems, too. I want to build a system that solves our problem and then see how it performs and maybe evolve that system or evolve away from it. And I've gotten lucky a lot where we haven't had to throw away things. I sort of see this as like, I've got a garden. I'm going to plant some trees over there. I'm going to plant some bushes over there. I've got these hedges along the side. Sometimes a business shows up and says, hey, I want a walkway to go right through those hedges. So I got to like chop a hole in them. Sometimes the trees die, so I got to pull them out. But if I look out on my garden over the last 4 or 5 years, most of the stuff is pretty much where I planted it. And I'm glad I put the effort in that I did. That makes, you know what? Maybe I'm sounding way too self-satisfied. I think I need you to tear me down here. That sounds, I think I'm making a horrible criminal mistake saying that out loud.
No, I think I will concede what you're saying. I think 2 points on that. One is that I think that's actually what happens in most real world scenarios now. It's very uncommon now to build something which is thrown away. Part of it I think is because differences in methodology. So
yeah, that's it. I would need that in the waterfall era.
Yeah, with the agile approach, I think there is the more room for what you're describing. 2, I think, and this is a negative aspect of this, is that I think a lot of times people don't throw away something that they probably should. And I think that's probably the flaw in this quote, which is that the so-called throwaway prototype, is only valuable if you actually throw it away. If you build a prototype and you then build the product from that prototype, then you're probably worse off than if you had just not tried to build a prototype.
There's an IKEA dresser in my office here, and the fronts of the drawers have fallen off. I'm still using it. I built that dresser.
Did you have spare parts? Was there...
So, you know what's funny about this quote is I have looked at some of the things you have built. We've worked together for years and thought, Yeah, I probably would have organized this. I would have put a little more effort into organizing this mic. Like, it's like I would have like polished it. I would have polished it a little. It does the job. It's great. I understand it. I like it. I just would have polished it a little more.
Yeah, I have the opposite reaction occasionally, which is
You should have done less.
why did we put all this work into a thing that we're clearly never going to use?
I just like the stuff. I like the stuff more than what it does. I think I have a very academic perspective in that way. I like talking about the thing more than doing the thing. No, I don't think that's true. Okay, so what's the score in the end? Did I win? Did I eke out a win, or we tied?
I think we lost track of the scoring because we were keeping points in the wrong way.
Yeah. This is like stolen from Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. They play tennis. They play questions tennis. All right, well, I had fun playing quotes tennis. We could probably play this again in the future. I got to really get some zingers, though. Like, I got to really try to win next time. I think that Fred Brooks was an ace. So you were right. That's a hard one for you. That was a little unfair because I was like, here's one Mike specifically cannot disagree with.
Yeah. It would be interesting to sort of put some research into ways that you could possibly disagree with that, but I can't think of anything.
The key feature of this game, no research. Come in cold.
True.
Drink some wine and then try it. It gets even harder.
Yeah, we should do that.
All right, now I'm going to close now. All right, thanks for joining us. Picture Me Coding is a music podcast about software. I am one of your hosts, Erik Aker, and I have a co-host, Mike Moll.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye. Thanks.